By the final waltz, everyone in the ballroom had noticed the poor girl no one intended to choose. Clara Bennett stood beneath a gilded mirror at the edge of Ashford House's grand ballroom, her hands folded over the faded blue silk of her mother's altered gown. Around her, candlelight spilled across polished floors, jeweled necklaces, and rows of smiling couples waiting for the orchestra to begin. She had been standing there for nearly an hour. Not one gentleman had approached her. Lady Vivian Ashford noticed, of course. Vivian noticed every weakness in a room because she enjoyed deciding which ones deserved an audience. She crossed the floor in silver satin, surrounded by young women who laughed before she had even spoken. "Miss Bennet," Vivian said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Surely someone has promised you this dance." Clara met her gaze. "No one has." "How unfortunate." Vivian's smile sharpened. Although perhaps honesty is kinder than false hope. A gentleman nearby lowered his glass to hide a laugh. Another whispered that Clara had no dowry, no estate, and no business attending a gathering meant for the county's finest families. Clara heard every word. She did not answer. Poverty was a circumstance. Cruelty was a choice. She would not confuse the two by allowing their shame to become hers. The orchestra lifted its bows. Couples moved toward the center of the floor. For one brief moment, a young man appeared to walk in Clara's direction. Vivian's friends fell silent, watching. Clara straightened. The gentleman reached her, smiled politely, and removed the empty chair behind her for his mother. Laughter moved through the room like a draft beneath a door. Clara placed her untouched glass on a silver tray. Her fingers did not tremble until she released it. "Leaving so soon?" Vivian asked. "I have seen enough," Clara replied. She turned toward the entrance. Then the ballroom changed. Conversations softened. Heads turned. Duke Nathaniel Blackwood had entered beneath the arched doorway, dressed in black, his dark hair touched by melting snow and his expression carrying the calm severity of a man who had not come to be admired. He ignored the mothers guiding eligible daughters into his path. He passed the Ashford heiress waiting with practiced confidence. His steel-gray eyes moved across the room and stopped on Clara. She felt the attention of every guest follow him as he began walking. One step, then another. The music hesitated. Vivian's smile disappeared. Nathaniel crossed the entire ballroom without looking away from the woman society had placed against the wall. He stopped before Clara and bowed. "Miss Bennet," he said, his voice quiet enough to belong only to her, though the room strained to hear it. "The next dance is mine, if you will trust me with it." Clara studied the hand he offered. "Your Grace, dancing with me will give them something to discuss for months. Then let us improve the quality of their conversation." She placed her hand in his. The orchestra began. Nathaniel led her into the waltz as the crowd opened around them, astonishment reflected in every mirror. Clara moved with measured grace, neither grateful nor overwhelmed. "You do not dance like a woman who expected to remain unnoticed," he said. "I learned long ago that being unseen is not the same as being unprepared." His gaze sharpened. "You wanted my attention." Clara waited until the next turn carried them beyond Vivian's hearing. "Not for the reason you think." "Then why?" Her hand tightened slightly against his. "A 10-year-old boy from Millbrook disappeared 3 nights ago. Before he vanished, he gave me a note bearing your family name." Nathaniel's composure did not break, but his steps slowed. "What was the boy's name?" "Thomas Reed." "And what did the note say?" Clara looked directly into the Duke's eyes while the entire ballroom watched them circle beneath the chandeliers. "It said someone at Blackwood Estate has been stealing the winter relief meant to keep children from freezing." 4 days earlier, Clara Bennett had been seated at the narrow kitchen table of her aunt's townhouse, repairing a torn cuff by candlelight while rain tapped against the windows. The house was warm, but only in the rooms meant for guests. Clara's small chamber beneath the roof carried the cold of December through every crack in the plaster. Her aunt, Mrs. Lydia Harcourt, entered with an invitation balanced between 2 fingers as though it were something unpleasant. "Lady Vivian Ashford is holding a winter ball," she said. "You will attend with us." Clara looked up from the needle. "Why?" "Because refusing would be noticed, and being noticed for the wrong reason is worse than being ignored." Her aunt placed the invitation beside the thread. "You may wear your mother's blue gown. It is old, but darkness hides many faults." Clara's gaze rested on the faded silk folded over the back of a chair. The gown had been altered twice and mended more times than she could count. It was still beautiful to her because her mother had once danced in it before illness and debt had reduced their household to silence. "I have work that evening," Clara said. "Your little lessons?" Her aunt sighed. "Those children will not become scholars because you teach them letters in an abandoned chapel." Clara threaded the needle again. "No, but they may become harder to deceive." Her aunt stared at her, found no answer that preserved dignity, and left. After midnight, Clara wrapped herself in a wool cloak and walked nearly a mile to the old chapel beyond Millbrook. 12 children waited inside beneath a roof that leaked snowmelt into tin bowls. She taught them reading by using shipping labels, market receipts, and coal vouchers because books were scarce and practical words might one day protect them. Thomas Reed usually arrived first. At 10 years old, he was thin, curious, and proud of the small wages he earned carrying delivery records between the village storehouse and the winter relief office. That night, his bench remained empty. "Thomas has not come home," his younger sister whispered. "Mother says he found work near Blackwood Estate." Clara's hand stilled over the slate. Thomas had spoken to her 2 evenings earlier about missing coal shipments. He had noticed that the numbers written on the delivery sheets did not match the wagons entering Millbrook. Clara had warned him not to ask questions alone. After the lesson, she went to the Reed cottage. Thomas's mother stood in the doorway with a shawl pulled tightly around her shoulders. "He left before dawn," she said. "A gentleman's servant promised him work in the north sheds. He never returned." On the table lay Thomas's cap and a torn scrap of paper. Clara unfolded it beneath the lamp. 3 words had been written in a hurried hand: Blackwood Winter Accounts. Beneath them was a line of numbers and a small ink mark shaped like a raven. Clara recognized the seal. It appeared on every relief voucher issued from Raven's Hire. The next morning, she visited the Millbrook coal shed. The doors were locked. Through a broken side window, she saw bare shelves where 20 tons of winter fuel should have been stored. Families had already paid through taxes and estate dues. Yet children were sleeping beneath thin blankets while official ledgers claimed the deliveries were complete. Clara returned home with the paper hidden inside her glove. When her aunt mentioned that Duke Nathaniel Blackwood would attend the Ashford ball, the invitation no longer seemed like an insult. It was an opportunity. Clara spent the next 3 nights repairing the blue gown and memorizing every number Thomas had written. She did not expect the Duke to believe her. Men with great houses rarely welcomed truths that entered through poor doors. Still, she would stand in his path and speak. Even if the ballroom laughed. Even if no one asked her to dance. Nathaniel Blackwood had no intention of attending the Ashford ball until a sealed report arrived from Raven's Hire shortly after sunrise. He stood alone in the breakfast room of Blackwood House, reading the same page twice while winter lights spread across the long table and turned the silver service pale. According to the report, every shipment of coal, flour, and blankets assigned to Millbrook had been delivered in full. According to the letters stacked beside it, families in Millbrook had received almost nothing. The contradiction had followed him for 3 weeks. Each time he demanded an explanation, another perfect ledger appeared. Every figure balanced. Every signature looked correct. Every official assured him that the complaints came from villagers who misunderstood the distribution schedule. Nathaniel trusted perfect records less than honest mistakes. Ashford Trading handled the northern deliveries, his estate secretary said from the doorway. Lord Charles Ashford signed the transport contracts himself. Nathaniel folded the report. "And who approved the payments?" "Your uncle, Mr. Edmund Blackwood." The answer settled heavily in the room. Edmund had managed Raven's Hire during the years after Nathaniel's parents died. He had taught him how to read estate accounts, judge men by their actions, and protect the Blackwood name from scandal. Questioning him felt ungrateful. Ignoring the missing supplies felt worse. "Charles Ashford will be at the ball tonight," the secretary continued. "So will half the county officials connected to the relief fund." Nathaniel looked toward the frost-covered windows. Beyond them, snow lay across London rooftops in clean white lines. In Millbrook, that same snow would be gathering against cottages with empty coal bins. Prepare the carriage. By evening, Ashford House blazed with candlelight and polished expectation. Nathaniel entered late enough to avoid the formal receiving line, but not late enough to escape notice. Mothers adjusted their daughters' gloves. Young women turned their faces toward him with rehearsed surprise. Lord Charles greeted him near the staircase with easy confidence and a glass of champagne in hand. "You chose a fortunate night to return to society," Charles said. "Vivian has been wondering whether Ravenshire has forgotten how to dance." "Ravenshire remembers many things," Nathaniel replied, "including accounts." Charles's smile held, though only barely. "Business at a ball? You disappoint me. Then we understand one another." Nathaniel moved away before the conversation could soften into lies. He watched the room instead. Lady Vivian stood at its center, radiant in silver, surrounded by men eager to be seen admiring her. Near the far wall stood a woman in an old blue gown. She did not watch the dancers. She watched the servants carrying trays through the side doors. When a young maid stumbled beneath the weight of a silver service, the woman stepped forward, steadied the tray, and quietly slipped a bread roll beneath the girl's folded napkin. No one else noticed. Nathaniel did. Later, he saw the same woman studying Lord Charles as he spoke with Edmund Blackwood near the terrace doors. Her expression was calm, but her attention was exact. She was not at the ball to be admired. She was waiting for something. A group of gentlemen nearby began whispering about her dress, her lack of dowry, and the certainty that she would remain against the wall all evening. Nathaniel heard one of them offer a wager. Before he could speak, the orchestra announced the final waltz. Lady Vivian approached the woman in blue with a smile too polished to be kind. The room began to turn toward them. Nathaniel saw the woman place her glass on a tray and lift her chin as laughter moved around her. Then she turned toward the door. He did not yet know her name. He only knew she had watched the relief officials more carefully than any investigator he had hired, and that everyone else in the ballroom had mistaken dignity for weakness. Nathaniel stepped away from Lord Charles. Then he began crossing the floor. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath as Nathaniel reached Clara. Lady Vivian stood only a few feet away, her silver gown gleaming beneath the chandeliers, while the gentleman who had laughed moments earlier suddenly found the polished floor more interesting than the woman they had mocked. Nathaniel bowed with formal precision. "Miss Bennet, the next dance is mine, if you will trust me with it." Clara looked at his offered hand, then at the faces surrounding them. "Your Grace, they will say you crossed the room only to make a spectacle." "They were already making one," he replied. "I merely objected to the subject." A flicker of surprise touched her expression. She placed her hand in his, and the orchestra began. Nathaniel guided her into the waltz as the crowd opened around them. Clara moved with quiet confidence, her steps exact, her posture graceful despite the faded gown and the weight of every stare. "You dance well," he said. "My mother believed poverty should not be allowed to erase beauty from a life. A practical philosophy. A necessary one." They turned beneath the chandeliers. In the mirrors lining the room, Clara saw Lady Vivian watching them with a smile that no longer reached her eyes. Nathaniel saw something else. Clara was not dazzled by his title. She was measuring him. "You wanted my attention," he said. "Yes. Then you chose a dangerous method." "I did not choose it. Your ballroom did." His hand steadied at her back as they moved past Lord Charles Ashford. "What do you know about Millbrook?" Clara asked. "Enough to know the winter stores were fully funded." "Then you know less than the children sleeping without coal." Nathaniel's expression hardened. "Be careful. I have been careful for 3 nights while a 10-year-old boy remained missing." The next turn brought them closer to the musicians, beyond the reach of casual listeners. Clara continued. "Thomas Reed carried delivery records between the village storehouse and the relief office. He found numbers that did not match. Before he disappeared, he left me a note with your family name." "Show me." "Not here. You accuse Blackwood Estate while refusing evidence." "I accuse no one. I am telling you that the seal on the missing coal vouchers belongs to your house." Nathaniel's steps did not falter, but the distance between them changed. The dance remained elegant. The conversation did not. "My uncle approved those accounts," he said. "Then your uncle should welcome questions. You speak boldly for someone who depends upon invitations from people like the Ashfords." Clara's green eyes lifted to his. "And you speak defensively for a man who claims to protect 800 families." The words struck cleanly because they were true. Nathaniel had crossed the ballroom believing he was saving her from humiliation. Now she was forcing him to see the limits of his own certainty. "If this is a deception," he said, "there will be consequences." "There already are." Clara glanced toward the servants gathered near the side doors. The only difference is that poor people have been paying them. The music slowed. Around them, couples prepared for the final turn. Nathaniel lowered his voice. Where is the note? Hidden in the chapel at Millbrook. You will take me there tomorrow. I will not be ordered. Then name your condition. Clara let the final measure carry them past Lady Vivian, who watched with barely concealed anger. Come without your title, without your uncle, and without warning the Ashfords. Nathaniel studied her face. You ask a duke to enter a village in secret. No, Clara said as the music ended. I ask a man to look at what his name has done. The next morning, Nathaniel left Blackwood House before sunrise in a plain dark coat, without the silver insignia of his rank. He brought no carriage marked with the family crest, only a hired horse and one trusted groom who remained half a mile behind. Clara was waiting near the old stone bridge outside Millbrook, wrapped in a brown wool cloak, the faded blue gown of the previous night replaced by a simple gray dress and sturdy boots. You came, she said. You sounded certain I would not. I sounded uncertain you would come quietly. A faint trace of amusement passed through his eyes, then vanished as they turned toward the village. Millbrook lay beneath a hard winter sky, its cottages pressed close against the wind. Smoke rose from only a few chimneys. Children carried broken baskets instead of books. Outside the relief storehouse, 3 women waited beside locked doors with empty sacks folded beneath their arms. Nathaniel slowed. The report said this building was supplied last week. Clara crossed to a side window and brushed frost from the glass. Inside, the shelves were bare. The reports also said 20 tons of coal arrived. Nathaniel examined the iron lock. It bore the Blackwood Raven. Who holds the key? Lord Charles's local agent. Clara led him to the abandoned chapel where she taught each night. The room was colder than the road. 12 narrow benches faced a scarred wooden table. Chalk letters covered a slate beside shipping labels, grocery receipts, and copied relief vouchers. Nathaniel stood beneath the cracked roof while melted snow fell into a tin bowl with slow, hollow drops. You teach here, when the children are not working. Why did no one tell me? Clara looked at him. They have written to Ravensshire for months. The answer carried no accusation, which made it harder to bear. She removed a loose stone beneath the front step and drew out Thomas's note. Nathaniel read the words Blackwood Winter Accounts, then studied the line of numbers below. They matched a shipment he had approved in October. Clara unfolded her father's old medical ledger beside it. My father treated families across 3 counties. He recorded payments because many could not pay in money. These entries are from his final winter. She pointed to repeated transfers marked Ashford Trading. The same company charged Millbrook for coal twice, once through the estate and once through the relief fund. Nathaniel turned the pages. The sums were small enough to escape notice individually, but together they formed a careful theft. Then he saw the approval signature. Edmund Blackwood, the man who had raised him, the man whose judgment he had trusted above his own. This could be copied, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Yes. Clara met his gaze. That is why we need Thomas. They left the chapel and followed the delivery road toward the northern sheds. Snow revealed wagon ruts leading away from Millbrook rather than toward it. After nearly 2 miles, the tracks ended beside an unused barn owned by Ashford Trading. Inside were stacked coal sacks bearing Ravensshire seals, enough to heat the village for weeks. Nathaniel stood among them in silence. The supplies never disappeared, Clara said. They were redirected. On the floor near the back wall lay a child's wool cap. Clara picked it up carefully. A faded red thread had been sewn around the brim. Thomas's mother mended this last month. Nathaniel looked toward the narrow road beyond the barn. Fresh carriage tracks cut through the snow, heading north. Someone moved him. Clara held the cap against her chest. Then we follow. Nathaniel's expression hardened, but not with anger at her. This time, you do not go alone. She studied him for a moment. That sounds less like an order. I am learning. As they stepped back into the cold, Nathaniel glanced once more at Edmund's signature in the ledger. For the first time, the name Blackwood felt heavier than the title attached to it. The carriage tracks continued north for nearly 4 miles before turning toward a remote tenant farm surrounded by bare fields and low stone walls. Nathaniel and Clara followed at a careful distance, guided by the shallow grooves still visible beneath the morning snow. His groom rode behind them, carrying a message for the nearest magistrate if trouble arose. Clara said little. She kept Thomas's red-stitched cap tucked beneath her cloak, one gloved hand resting over it, as though the small piece of wool could lead them more surely than any road. The farm appeared beyond a line of leafless trees, its house dark except for a single window glowing beside the kitchen door. A wagon stood near the barn. The raven seal of Ravensshire had been scraped from its side, but not completely. Nathaniel dismounted and studied the remaining mark. They expected no one to look closely. People who steal from the poor rarely expect the powerful to inspect where the poor live, Clara replied. Nathaniel accepted the truth without defense. They approached the house together. Before he could knock, the door opened, and a gray-haired woman stared at them with alarm. Clara showed her Thomas's cap. "We are looking for the boy who owns this." The woman's expression softened. "He is upstairs. A man brought him here 3 days ago and said his mother had agreed to let him work. The child refused to believe it, but the roads were blocked, and I could not send him home alone." Clara released a breath she had been holding since Millbrook. Thomas appeared at the top of the stairs, pale with worry but unharmed. When he saw her, he ran down and stopped only when he reached the final step. "Miss Bennet, I tried to come back." "I know." She knelt and returned his cap. "Your mother is waiting." Nathaniel stood several feet away, allowing the reunion to belong to them. Thomas noticed him and grew still. "That is the Duke." "Today," Clara said, "he is here to listen." They gathered around the farmhouse table while the woman poured warm milk. Thomas explained that Lord Charles's clerk had promised him work checking delivery numbers. Instead, the carriage carried him north. Before leaving Millbrook, Thomas had seen Charles change figures in the relief ledger. He had also seen Edmund Blackwood accept a thick envelope and place the original account pages inside his coat. "Are you certain it was my uncle?" Nathaniel asked. Thomas nodded. "He wore the black ring with the raven. He told Lord Charles no one would question a Blackwood signature." Nathaniel turned toward the window. Snowlight rested across his face, revealing the quiet collapse of something Clara could not repair for him. Edmund had not merely betrayed the estate. He had used the trust of a grieving boy who had once regarded him as a father. On the journey back, Thomas rode safely with the groom, while Nathaniel and Clara followed behind. For several miles, only the sound of hooves disturbed the winter silence. "You were right," Nathaniel said at last. "I wish I had not been." "So do I." His hands tightened around the reins. "My uncle taught me that duty was the difference between power and corruption." Clara looked toward him. "Perhaps he taught you the truth and failed to live by it." Nathaniel met her gaze. "You offer mercy easily." "No, I offer clarity. They are not the same." The road curved above Millbrook, revealing the locked coal shed and the chapel roof below. Nathaniel slowed his horse. "When this is finished, the supplies will be returned. The school will have a proper building." Clara's expression remained guarded. "Do not promise what guilt makes easy. Then tell me what would make it honest. Let the village control the fund. Publish every account. Pay the teachers. Listen before winter arrives." Nathaniel inclined his head. "Done." For the first time, Clara believed he meant it. Behind them, Thomas called her name. She turned toward the child, and neither she nor Nathaniel noticed the dark carriage waiting on the distant ridge, where Lady Vivian watched them return together and understood that Clara Bennet now possessed the one thing more dangerous than the Duke's attention: his trust. Lady Vivian moved before sunset. By the time Nathaniel returned Thomas to Millbrook and ordered the coal sheds opened, a sealed packet had already reached the Ravensshire Council. Inside were copied ledger pages showing payments made to Clara Bennet over 6 months, each marked as compensation from the Winter Relief Fund. Her name appeared beside sums large enough to ruin her. The figures were false, but the signatures were careful. Edmund Blackwood presented the documents in the council chamber with the grave composure of a man pretending duty had wounded him. "I warned you," he told Nathaniel. "The woman saw an opportunity in your concern and built a story around it." Lord Charles stood near the fire, pale but steady. Lady Vivian sat beside her brother, one gloved hand resting on the arm of her chair. "It is painful," she said, "but perhaps Miss Bennet believed a scandal would force His Grace to protect her reputation." Clara entered with Thomas and his mother just as the accusation was read aloud. The room turned toward her. Once again, she stood before people who had already decided what poverty meant. Nathaniel remained at the head of the table, Thomas's testimony written before him, the forged accounts beside it. "Did you receive any money from the relief office?" he asked. Clara looked at the pages. "Never." Edmund pushed them toward her. "That is your signature. It resembles mine." "Convenient." Thomas stepped forward. "I saw Lord Charles change the numbers." Charles smiled thinly. "A frightened child can be taught to repeat many things." Thomas's mother drew him closer. Clara's voice stayed calm. "The original books will prove it." Edmund's expression hardened. "The original books were lost during the transfer from Millbrook." Nathaniel looked from the false signatures to his uncle, the man who had raised him, the woman who had told him the truth. For one brief moment, doubt entered his face. Clara saw it. That was enough. She reached to the collar of her cloak and removed the small black raven brooch Nathaniel had given her that morning as proof of his authority during the investigation. She placed it on the table between them. "You asked me to trust that you would listen," she said. Nathaniel rose. "Clara, I need time to examine this." Time is what powerful men ask for when the cost of doubt belongs to someone else. Vivian lowered her eyes to hide her satisfaction. Edmund spoke more gently now. "No one wishes to humiliate you, Miss Bennet. Admit what you have done, and perhaps mercy can still be arranged." Clara turned toward him. "Mercy from the guilty is only another form of control." A murmur crossed the chamber. Nathaniel stepped around the table. "Do not leave. You have already left me standing alone." Her words were quiet, but they silenced the room. "I survived being invisible, Your Grace. I will also survive being misunderstood." She took Thomas's hand and walked toward the door. No one stopped her. Nathaniel watched until the dark wood closed behind them, then turned back to the forged pages. Something in the first entry caught his attention. The date was 6 years earlier. The ink carried a faint violet sheen. He lifted the paper closer to the candle. Prussian violet ink had not reached Ravenshire until 3 years ago. The ledger could not be genuine. Nathaniel looked at Edmund. For the first time, his uncle's composure faltered. "Where are the original books?" Nathaniel asked. Edmund did not answer. Nathaniel's voice became colder. "Where are they?" Charles moved toward the side door, but 2 guards stepped into his path. Vivian rose abruptly. "You cannot mean to trust that girl over your own family." Nathaniel turned to her. "No, I mean to trust the truth over everyone." Outside the council chamber, Clara crossed the snow-covered courtyard with Thomas beside her, unaware that behind her the first lock in the Blackwood conspiracy had finally begun to break. Nathaniel ordered the council chamber sealed and sent trusted men to search every archive connected to the Winter Fund. Edmund Blackwood remained seated beneath the portraits of generations who had carried his name, while Lord Charles stood near the guarded door and Lady Vivian watched the room with disbelief slowly replacing outrage. "You are destroying your own family," Edmund said. Nathaniel placed the forged ledger beneath the candle. "No, I am learning what it tried to destroy." The violet ink had revealed the lie, but not the full truth. That lay somewhere in the original books. Nathaniel remembered a locked storage vault beneath the Old West offices, a place Edmund had once forbidden him to enter as a boy. Within minutes, the key was found on Edmund's watch chain. The vault smelled of dust, wax, and damp stone. Shelves held years of shipping records, relief contracts, and sealed correspondence. Behind a row of abandoned estate ledgers, Nathaniel discovered a narrow tin box marked Ashford Trading. Inside were the original Millbrook accounts, letters from Charles, and payment orders signed by Edmund. The missing coal had been redirected and sold through private warehouses. The blankets had been charged twice. The food shipments had been reduced before leaving Ravenshire. Every theft was small enough to appear harmless alone. Together, they formed a winter of suffering. At the bottom of the box lay Clara's real signature on a petition requesting aid for the chapel school. Edmund had copied it from there. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. He had asked Clara for time because part of him had still hoped the people he loved were innocent. She had paid for that hope. By evening, the Ashfords' winter charity gathering had already begun. Nathaniel could have canceled it. Instead, he entered the ballroom carrying the original ledgers beneath one arm. The same chandeliers burned above the same polished floor where Clara had once stood alone. Lady Vivian was speaking near the orchestra, assuring guests that unfortunate rumors about the relief fund would soon be resolved. She smiled when she saw Nathaniel. "Your Grace, I knew you would restore order." That is precisely why I am here. The music stopped. Nathaniel placed the ledgers on the central table and addressed the room. He named every false shipment, every missing payment, and every signature used to conceal the theft. Then he spoke of his own failure. Miss Bennet brought me the truth. I doubted her because accepting it required me to question a man I trusted. That hesitation was cowardice dressed as caution. The ballroom fell silent. Edmund's face lost all color. Charles looked toward the doors, but guards already stood there. Vivian lifted her chin. You cannot expect society to believe the claims of a poor woman and a village child. They need not believe claims, Nathaniel replied. They may read the accounts. The doors opened behind him. Clara entered with Thomas, his mother, and several families from Millbrook. She wore the same faded blue gown, carefully mended, but no one laughed. Nathaniel stepped aside from the table. Miss Bennet, the truth is yours to explain. Clara approached without looking at Vivian. Page by page, she showed how the figures had been altered, how the delivery dates failed to match the weather records, and how the forged payments used ink unavailable at the time. Thomas identified the clerk who had changed the numbers. The original vouchers confirmed every word. When Clara finished, the silence felt different from the night of the waltz. Then, it had been the silence of judgment. Now, it was the silence of shame. Vivian spoke first. You came here seeking revenge. Clara looked at her calmly. No, I came because children were cold. Edmund, Charles, and Vivian were removed from control of the fund and placed under formal investigation. No scene of cruelty followed, only the quiet collapse of lies under evidence. Nathaniel turned to Clara after the room had emptied. I cannot ask forgiveness tonight. No, she said. You cannot. Then I will begin with restitution. He opened the ledger to a blank page. The fund will be public. Millbrook will choose its trustees. The school will belong to the village. Your position will not depend upon me. Clara studied him. And your family name? Nathaniel looked toward the Blackwood crest above the fireplace. It will mean whatever my actions make it mean from this day forward. For the first time since leaving the council chamber, Clara did not turn away. Spring returned to Ravensshire slowly, first as rain along the harbor roofs, then as green shoots rising beside the Millbrook chapel. By April, the abandoned building had been replaced with a proper schoolhouse of warm brick and wide windows. Clara directed it through an independent village trust, exactly as she had demanded. Teachers received wages. Every relief payment was posted publicly. Coal deliveries were counted by 2 elected residents before any ledger was signed. Nathaniel provided the funds, but his name appeared nowhere above the door. He visited often without ceremony, sometimes carrying books, sometimes listening while Clara explained why a duke who interrupted lessons was no less disruptive than any other guest. Trust did not return in a single grand gesture. It returned in smaller things. Nathaniel published the estate accounts before anyone requested them. He testified against Edmund and Charles without hiding behind family loyalty. When Lady Vivian withdrew from society, he did not speak cruelly of her. He only ensured she never again controlled a charitable fund. Most importantly, he never asked Clara to forgive him before she was ready. The spring ball at Ravensshire Hall arrived beneath a sky washed clean by rain. Clara attended in a deep blue gown made by the women of Millbrook, elegant without pretending she had forgotten the faded dress that once marked her poverty. Her aunt scarcely recognized the woman who entered the ballroom with Thomas and his mother as honored guests. Gentlemen who had ignored Clara during winter now crossed the floor to request dances. Some admired her courage. Others admired her new position. Clara understood the difference. She declined them all with equal courtesy. Nathaniel watched from beside the tall windows. He wore black as he had on the first night, but the severity in his face had softened into something quieter. He did not approach until the orchestra prepared the final waltz. Then he crossed the ballroom once more. The crowd parted, though no one laughed this time. Nathaniel stopped before Clara and bowed. Miss Bennet, may I have this dance? She regarded him carefully. The room is already watching. Then they may witness me asking rather than deciding. And why are you asking? His eyes held hers. Not because you require rescue. You never did. I am asking because I have never felt more honest than when standing beside you. And because every good thing Ravensshire has become began when you refused to flatter me. A quiet smile touched Clara's face. That is not a particularly romantic confession. I am told honesty is more useful. Who told you that? A woman who once accused my family of stealing coal during a waltz. Clara placed her hand in his. One dance. Only one. The rest must still be earned. Nathaniel inclined his head. Then I will earn them. They moved onto the floor as the music began. This time, Clara did not feel the judgment of the mirrors or the weight of whispered names. Beyond the open doors, evening light rested across the restored harbor, where ships carried goods purchased through honest contracts. Thomas stood near the musicians, proudly reading the printed program to his mother. Millbrook's teachers danced beside merchants and estate workers. For one rare hour, rank mattered less than character. When the waltz ended, Nathaniel did not hold Clara in place. He released her hand and waited. Clara looked around the ballroom that had once made her feel invisible. Then she offered her hand again. Perhaps one more. Nathaniel smiled. I was hoping you might reconsider. The orchestra began a second dance, but the choice belonged entirely to her. The right person does not give you worth. They crossed the room because they finally recognized the worth that was always yours.